friends. Welcome to episode 2 of Tim's Travails. Our guest today is Stacey Kalamaras, the founding partner of Kalamaras Law in Chicago. And she is amazing. And I am Hope Katz-Gibbs, proud producer of the show on Incandescent Radio and Incandescent TV. Tim is our new client, so check out his website, timothytrainer.com. But first, before they get into their Q&A, let me tell you a little bit about Stacey. Having started her career in Washington, D.C., close to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, and more recently in Chicago, Stacey has worked for one of the world's largest law firms, managing global trademark portfolios. She has spent more than 30 years working for some of the world's most beloved brands in more than 150 countries for clients in diverse industries. In January 2018, with the founding of her what is that word, Stacey? Eponymous?
Eponymous. So
Eponymous
self-named.
firm.
Self-named.
I love it. I love it. She now assists small and medium-sized businesses helping them identify, register, protect, and commercialize their brands in the US and abroad, which is amazing. Thank you so much for doing that for all of us out here in the world, small business especially, big business too. But today we're going to talk about all the change, or you and Tim are going to talk about all the changes that you've made and the importance of being able to be nimble and move with the times, especially here we are, it's June 5th, 2025, and everything seems to be changing on an hourly basis. So we're going to talk about the importance of embracing change. So take it over, Mr. Timothy.
Well, thank you very much, Hope, and welcome, Stacey. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, very welcome. Kind of fun to talk to somebody that we've shared the camera in front of been in front of the camera and done some education sessions and so on. But I think that the theme of change makes me want to ask you the question of what caused you to go from being in that marketing advertising world pre-law school and getting you to go to law school after so many years doing that without a law degree.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think some people may have heard me speak before. I wanted to go to law school straight out of undergrad, and I pulled the plug. So I was registered, I was all signed up to go, and about 6 weeks before orientation began, I pulled the plug. And it's probably a good thing that I did because I thought I was going to be a prosecutor. I thought I was going to be putting bad guys away. And you laugh because it's a very, very different life I would have had.
Yes.
And I often say that I'm not sure I would have made it through law school had I gone when I was 22. I was working for a small corporate law office in the northern suburbs here in Chicago, and as a receptionist the summer between undergrad and law school. And it was a great experience, an interesting experience, but I just didn't like the way I just saw something in the way the female partners were being treated, not by the male colleagues, interestingly enough, not by the male attorneys, but by the clients.
Oh.
The clients didn't want to work with them because I was the receptionist. So I sort of saw all this. And I just came home and I said to my mom, yeah, no, I'm not doing this. Like, why would I put myself through all of this? Like, the clients didn't want to work with them.
Wow.
So she said, you're going to have to talk to your father. My father ruled with an iron fist. He was the disciplinarian. What the man says goes. It was very much my big fat Greek wedding in my household. And so my dad was upset. He was disappointed. We were bargaining. And so to sort of get him off my back, I said to him, because he said, you're going to be CEO of a company one day. So it's a great background for you. And I said, look, I'm not going. Like, I'll pay you back. I want to start working. I'll go back when I'm 40, I told him. It was a random number. And I just did that to get him off my back.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be sort of prophetic. And he said, well, then you better start working, young lady. And I said, yeah, you're not listening to me. I want to work. I want to earn money. And he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to work in sales and marketing. I had no idea what that entailed, of course. And so I did a lot of different things in marketing when I was 22. I was a telemarketer, what they call inside sales. I hated that so much. I did marketing communications, and I sort of fell into my role in brand management. I was a little bit older at 27. I got my start at the NutraSweet company as a brand assistant. And my first project was a packaging redesign project for the Equal brand. We did everything on flats then, it wasn't computerized. And my role was to route the package flats to all the departments, sales, packaging, and also legal and regulatory. And when I went up to the legal floor, and regulatory shared the same floor, our corporate counsel was so upset because like the circle R's weren't on there, the copyright statement wasn't on there, the serving suggestion wasn't on the package. And I just thought, this woman is so busy. Why should she be monitoring circle R's and copyright statements? So I just basically got a downloaded list from her of all the things she needed. And I became the gatekeeper with all of our various agencies. And so, without really understanding it at the time, understanding it now from my vantage point,
Yeah.
I became like the paralegal of the group. And we had, three or four very large agencies that we were working with. And I would just send things back. Nope, it doesn't have a circle R. Nope, it doesn't have the copyright statement. Nope, it doesn't have distributed by. Tim, I had no idea what any of these things
Yeah.
meant, but I was really good at, pushing back on the
Well,
agencies.
one of the things that what you're saying actually causes me to think back to when back in the day prior to me actually working in the area of copyrights and trademarks, I didn't know what it was because I hadn't studied that in law school. And so when they asked me if I wanted to do that kind of work, I literally had to go out and create my own little library of books to read so that I knew what I was going to be doing at work. So it was an on-the-job kind of thing like you're talking about.
Yep.
Just the comment that you made about, being a prosecutor, that can, depending upon your own personality. I mean, I worked in a prosecutor's office when I was in law school, and bringing that stuff home every night when after you've gone through dealing with people who been victims is not an easy thing to live with day in and day out. So
Yeah.
I can appreciate that, but I think that what you're talking about is really interesting. The little nuances, shall we say, of owning these things that we call copyright and trademarks because they are assets to a company. And most people just don't think about this is the way they generate revenue, right?
Right. Well, and I worked for the NutraSweet company in the early 90s, about 1993. And so NutraSweet was off patent then. So
Oh, okay.
all the blue competitors were coming
Yeah.
in and we faced a lot of competition. And so there were conversations over, can we protect the blue color? Now, you and I understand what this means, but so we,
Yeah.
Winston and Strawn was our outside counsel, a phenomenal, firm here in Chicago, and of
Yeah.
course, throughout the
Right.
country.
Right.
And we would get these emails in our brand group from, I mean, a number of people in Winston and Strawn about our promotions, about the blue color, about our trademarks. And I'm reading these going, man, that's a lot of lawyers commenting just on brands. And that's when I sort of put it together. This is a whole area of law. I mean, the
Yeah.
reason I wanted to be a prosecutor is I grew up watching LA Law. That was the biggest legal drama when I was growing up. And you either wanted to be Susan Day or you wanted to sleep with Susan Day. I mean, no one wanted to be Arnie Becker. He was a scoundrel, right? So I wanted to be Susan Day. She was very professional. She was very good at her job. So, I mean, that's what inspired me to be a lawyer. Younger lawyers maybe wanted to be Ally McBeal. I'm not sure. I mean, that's sort of my frame of reference. So I saw all these emails and I went, what is this intellectual property? Like, I don't get it. I was a philosophy and poli sci major. I didn't know anything about this intellectual property. So within 6 months of starting at the NutraSweet company, I enrolled in business school because I was a liberal arts major and it changed everything for me. I really wanted to learn business and I had a marketing concentration, during my MBA. But our corporate counsel, I mean, she was a generalist, right? She wasn't an IP
Right.
specific, but every chance I got, I went up to the fifth floor and I drove her and the regulatory person nuts. I asked them all these questions. And in a full circle moment, after I graduated from law school, I found this woman on LinkedIn. She had sort of retired. And I just said to her, I said, I don't think you realize the impact you had on my career, but I wanted to be like you. And you really inspired me to go to law school. And it's really nice to be able to thank people for the inspiration that they didn't even know they had in your career. But I would sit in big cross-functional team meetings, and our vice president of marketing would say to me, which is really sort of crazy because I was like low man on the totem pole, we'd be talking about new promotions because I mean, Equal was just spinning in those years. So Stacey, if we do a promotion on pack and we want to say free, how long do we get to use the free flag on the packaging? And I would say, oh, 6 months. I mean, I knew the answer, but I didn't know why it was the answer. So it was really crazy that people were counting on me. I understand all these things now, but when I look back, at 27-year-old Stacey, like being the voice of the legal department there, it was really quite crazy.
So then all of this stuff basically, I guess, directed you to go to law school and get that degree and get into the work.
It fueled my interest, but I wanted to learn everything I could about the business. I was just starting out. It was really, really fun. But for me, I found the business people really, really reckless. And
Hmm.
I always sided with the lawyers. I
Yeah.
thought they were right most of the time, but I was just starting my career. So, from the Nutri Company, I went to the Alberto Culver Company. And then from the Alberto Culver Company, I went to work for a German candy company called Stork. And I was really in charge there. I, had P&L responsibility. I was really calling the shots and I
So,
loved it. But then I was like, I'm just really not sure this is for me. And I
yeah.
knew I needed a change, but I wasn't quite ready for the big change of law school. So then I went agency side. I'm like, yeah, that's the change I need. It wasn't the change I needed. I didn't like being on the client side. I didn't like being on the service end side, which is ironic because that's what we do as lawyers. But I went agency side, and then we lost our big client that I was brought in to bring. And I was working in Milwaukee, and then I went to work for Miller Brewing as a contractor, which was very interesting. I worked in government affairs, which was like tangential to the legal
Yeah.
department. I worked for a lawyer, but not in the legal department. And then I was like, you know what? I need a change. And I did all sorts of soul searching. I actually did career testing, and lawyer and judge kept rising to the top of the list. And I was like, do I need a house to fall on me? So I retook the LSAT. I reapplied to law schools. And this was right after 9/11, actually.
Hmm.
And I sold my house to pay for the first year of law school. And I thought, what am I waiting for? Like, and it was the
Yeah.
perfect time for me. I was 34 when I ended up enrolling in law school, and I decided to go full time to
Yeah.
because business school was hard for me. I was getting more and more senior in my marketing career, and I was traveling a lot for my career. And business school almost killed me, to be honest. It took me almost 5 years to complete
Hmm.
it. And I knew, again, even though I felt our industry had progressed, I knew as a woman approaching 40, I knew it was important for me to get through law school before I was 40 and to do very, very well so I could have as many options available to
Yeah.
me as possible. So I wanted to quit my career, which was very successful and I made a lot of money, but I wanted to focus full time on law school. And I'm really glad I did. It was the best 3 year vacation of my life, honestly.
So how long did you, I know you worked at some of the big law firms before you started your own firm. I guess,
I was
that's probably,
riffed in
oh, okay.
2009 at the beginning of the recession.
Ah,
So I graduated in 2005.
yeah.
It took me about 6 months to find a place to land because I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And law firms don't like when you're like, well, I want to come work for you, but only, doing this. They're
Yeah.
like, I'm sorry, what? No, you'll do what I tell you.
Yeah.
A funny story though, I didn't set out to be a trademark attorney. I wanted
Oh,
to be a consumer protection FTC attorney, I thought. And I couldn't find a job here in Chicago. And Doris Long, who we have in common, which is
yeah.
how we met, who was my trademark and copyright professor, suggested that I start expanding my horizons to DC. And once I did, that's when opportunities opened up for me. But I was networking with a fellow alum from my school, and she was a trademark attorney. And then she said, look, about 6 months after I graduated, she said, look, there's another, she needed help, but she didn't have enough work to keep me busy. And she said, there's an of counsel in our firm who's being promoted. He's on the advertising side, I'm on the trademark side. And I think between the two of us, we can keep you busy. So I didn't land a job in DC until February. I graduated in May. So that was 2006. And I ended up leaving that firm. That was at Kelly Dry. I ended up leaving that firm in the middle of 2007, going to work for Mintz Levin. And then in 2008, as the market crashed, we started losing clients. And, it was, I mean, it was a pure business decision. I was the last one they hired in the group. And so I was the first to go. So at the beginning of 2009, I was riffed.
Yeah.
So I only spent about 3 years in DC, and no one really knew what was going to happen. The interesting thing is, I had clients. I had 6 clients at that time. So I had wonderful people around me in DC who said, you have to form a firm. I said, are you crazy? Like, I don't know anything about a firm. And they're like, no, it's easy. Like, we'll help you. It was different having a firm back then in 2009. It very different than now. The technology wasn't there. Most people weren't. I mean, you were very cutting edge if you were an all electronic firm back then. So, I mean, I was still using trifolds. So people directed me where to order the trifolds from, who to buy my malpractice insurance from. I mean, I knew nothing. And so they're like, don't let your clients go. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. So the first iteration of KLO was in 2009, but all my clients went bankrupt by the end of
Oh,
2010 because they
wow.
were tiny. It was,
Yeah.
you
Well,
remember, I mean,
yeah.
a lot of lawyers today didn't live through the recession. They were still in college or they were in law school
Well,
then.
and I think that now what you just said actually is another thing that we as lawyers sometimes people don't think about it, but while we focus on the law, when we're dealing with smaller businesses, because and they predominate the market, right? Small businesses do.
Absolutely.
But what we end up realizing is if you're in this world of, well, probably a lot of areas of law, but certainly in the intellectual property, copyright, trademark, patent area, trade secrets area, we actually are providing a lot of not legal advice, but business advice as well.
Hmm.
And that's another part of it that maybe sometimes gets lost in the fog of all of this because what they see is I want to make the product, I want to get it out there because I need the money.
Yes.
That's great, except that if you actually come up with something really great, if you don't protect it, somebody's going to steal that idea and duplicate it, and you've got no protection. And all of a sudden, you have to explain why they need to spend money
Yeah.
on you
Yeah.
to help them protect what it is they've created.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that, if most of your clients are small businesses, you have refined that message, I'm sure, and had to repeat it many times, a million different ways.
I have so many horror stories about that. We could talk for hours about horror
I'm sure
stories
we
about
could.
that. Yeah, it's really tough. And I mean, those were exceedingly difficult years. I mean, not only small businesses suffered, but large brand owners
Hmm.
suffered. I
Yeah.
mean, marketing spends went to zero. And, I had, well-established businesses saying to me, Stacey, what do I do? I
Yeah.
mean, do I file renewals on my trademarks or do I file annuities on my patents? And I'm not a patent attorney. I know you aren't either, but we both know enough to know that you have to pay those patent annuities,
Yep.
especially if it's important to the business.
Sure.
We can forego the trademark stuff because there are other protections at common law. It's not ideal, But
Right.
when you had a situation like you had between 2009 and 2012, you had to sort of ration the budget to
Right.
focus on those patents. And I had people say to me, I can't believe you just told me to do that. And I
Yeah.
said, because that's what's right for the business.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a nice lead into the next question I have for you, which is, were all these experiences what led you to get into trademark abilities?
So yes, yes, in a way. The 2010 to 2014 were very difficult years for me, and I've shared that publicly because in this day and age on social media, I'm not a big Instagram person, but on any social media platform, people only see the good, and then it affects our confidence and it affects our imposter syndrome, and we think we're less than. And it's so important. I'm not ashamed at all about my journey because it's my journey that's helped to make me who I am today. But I lost two jobs within 18 months between 2009 and the end of 2010. I went in-house. I was riffed again to fund an acquisition in Europe along with a bunch of other wonderful people. But you talk about crushing your soul. It's soul crushing, especially for type A people who, I mean, I never had lost a job until I was in my 40s. I mean, that's really tough. Um, in 2014, I went back to Big Law, which was really good for me. I like Big Law. It's a hard position for someone who's a non-traditional lawyer, to be in, but those are sort of the clients that I enjoy. They've got great issues, they've got great brands. And in 2014, 2015, I noticed that just senior associates weren't trained the same way. I'm not saying it was bad, but they weren't trained in the same way that I was trained in 2006, 2007. And they didn't know the same things that I knew 10 years out. And so I asked one of my partners, like, do you do training here? And she's like, oh, don't get me started. She's like, we used to. I'm like, but she's like, well, partners aren't really incentivized to train now. Like
Right.
with sort of how salaries have crept up, we don't have time to. And I'm like, but that just doesn't make sense. Like, how can you not train people and have sixth, seventh, eighth year associates not understanding the basics of how to do things? Like it leads to more mistakes. And as salaries creep up, more and more clients don't
Yeah.
want junior associates working on their portfolios. So I was very lucky. I got to cut my teeth on amazing work and big portfolios. And so this problem is only becoming a bigger problem. So it
Yeah.
was in 2014 that I said to her, I said, can I see your old training materials? And they were excellent, but no one was being trained on them. So I'm not a good standardized test taker. I always used like Kaplan to study for tests. And I had this idea, like, I want to become like the Kaplan of trademark law. I
Yeah.
didn't know what that meant. And then, you and I met, 20 years ago when I was a law school student, and, everything there is to know about counterfeiting. And
No, I don't think so.
well, I think so. And when I restarted my firm in 2018, one of the ways I wanted to develop business was to educate other lawyers.
Yeah.
And I have a very particular point of view about that. I believe it should be offering practical advice and practical tips. And counterfeiting's a hot button topic for me. And
Yep.
I had invited you to speak with me. And so that was successful. And then I had this idea of, well, I wonder if maybe I can test a concept of giving practical tips to other lawyers who maybe want to learn trademark law. And I tested that concept over a series of months, and it eventually led to trademark abilities.
Oh,
But that's really honestly how it
yeah.
came to be. But building it was a different story. Learning how to market it and how to sell it. I mean, it's 5 years later, and we're still learning.
Yeah.
But I think it was born out of the fact that in 2009, when I was first a solo, even though I had been in big law, there were no resources
Right.
for me,
Right.
right? There was nobody to lean on. And today, it's such a deliberate choice for attorneys. So many attorneys graduate from law school intending to work on their own. And I think it's such a brave choice because I wouldn't have the
Yeah.
guts to do that, Tim. I mean, I would
Yeah.
want to go work for someone for a few years and learn everything I could before I ventured out on my own. But these attorneys, they're so entrepreneurial, they're so brave. But what's missing is the substance
Right.
and how to do things. And so they're trying to cobble together, to your point, their own library. And so I want to be, that resource for them. I have such a passion for this area, and I want to make sure that whoever wants to learn it can, but also selfishly, I can't
Yeah.
represent every client. So I also want to make sure the clients are well cared for
Yeah.
because brands are important and they're
Oh,
valuable.
absolutely. Yeah. No, I think that what you're doing as far as you're doing traditional legal work through your firm, obviously, but then with the
Right.
trademark abilities, providing that educational aspect, which is a wholly different branch, and actually a little bit of it's a separate business, shall we say,
It
from
is.
your legal work. So I
Yeah.
think it also highlights the idea that the notion that people are going to have to think about, okay, I may have gone to school for X, Y, or Z when I was, 20 to 25. But 10 years down the road, with the way technology is and the way everything is changing so quickly, that career that you thought you were going to have when you were 25 may not be there when you're 40. And it requires that rethinking, re-education, retooling that has to go on. And I think in your own legal work, you found a way to have two different things going on, which is maybe, let's say, a little more of a traditional legal practice, but also having the education side of it as well. Because I think these days, you're right. I mean, you can't be paying somebody straight out of law school a six-figure income and not expect them to bill, because education time takes away from billing time. And law
Yes.
firms want to be generating income, not
Yes.
teaching, right? Because that
Right.
that to them anyway, in their mind, that doesn't generate income. That's
Right.
just time that could have been billed that isn't being billed. So they're looking at
Right.
the bottom line.
Yeah.
And I think that from that perspective, what you're doing, actually, I don't know how much it generates from an income perspective, but trademark abilities, if you think about it from a CLE perspective, we all have to pay for continuing legal education. So if trademark abilities is built on that kind of a model, I mean, it's still an income stream that's separate and apart from having clients as a legal client. So
Yep.
I think it's what you're doing and what you've been doing is great, and it shows how you do have to pivot and be doing multiple things at the same time. And it's a really good example, not just in the legal profession, but for any profession. I mean, it's something that you have to think about.
Yeah, I agree. And, for me, it's funny. I shared a little bit towards the end of last year, personally, my story, which I'm not always good about doing, but I wanted to be a teacher from the time I was very, very young. And my father sort of forbade it because he's like, you'll be poor. And, I think I was a budding lawyer then because I said, well, Dad, if there were no great teachers, there would not be rich people or successful people. So
Yeah,
I was sort of very argumentative even back then. But this, trademark abilities sort of feeds my soul in a different way.
yeah,
I love being a trademark attorney. Um, I can't imagine doing anything else, but I really enjoy, mentoring and doing better for our profession.
yeah,
We need we the the royal we lawyers, we get so upset when young attorneys don't know how to do something, and it's so ridiculous. I don't think the law school curriculum needs to change all that much. I think lawyers need to learn how to think, how to research, how to do IRAC. I think all those things are incredibly important to what we do as lawyers. Very much how I believe in a liberal arts undergraduate education. The particulars of whatever industry you go into should be learned on the job and
yeah,
taught to you by those who have experience. And I think if lawyers get too busy to teach that, then shame on us.
yeah. Well,
And we have to give back, right? And people like you and Doris and others who give so generously of their time, we have to pay that forward. And we can't forget that there are so many others who have ever, all of us are who we are because someone else extended their hand to us and helped us.
No,
Not a single one of us is successful because we did it 100% on our own.
I totally agree. Totally agree.
Yeah, and so what I'm trying to do is, I made mistakes, I made missteps, and I'm trying to help these attorneys learn from it. So it's, here's how I set up my firm. Here's how I communicate to my clients after I file a trademark application. I just try to make it very turnkey for them, and then they can look at it and say, "Oh, that's cool, but here's how I want to do it instead." Fine. I'm not trying to make, hundreds of Stacey's, but I'm just trying to, sometimes it's just helpful to see how someone else did it so you know how you want to put your own spin on it.
Yeah. No, I think it's been great what you've been able to do, and
It's fun.
you certainly have been successful doing it. And when you have 6,500 people trained over the last several years, that's a great accomplishment. So keep the job going, and to
Thanks.
the extent there might be something I can contribute, I'm happy to do so. And
Thank you.
I thank you for giving us a little bit of your time today.
Thank
So
you.
thank you
Thank
very
you so
much,
much for
Stacey,
having me.
and
Wow.
all the best.
Yeah,
Thank
that was
you.
amazing, you guys. Stacey, wow, what an amazing career. How you've learned to pivot and just like go with it, right? That's the key. So we also do the Truly Amazing Women series, and I'm going to feature this and you on that because you're an inspiration to women. Like,
Thank you, Hope. That's
you
kind of
just
you to say.
keep knocking it down. And so we're really impressed and proud and keep up the great work. And thank you, Tim,
Yeah.
intellectual property attorney, Timothy Trainer, host of Tim's Travails on Incandescent Radio and Incandescent TV. I'm Hope Katz-Gibbs, proud producer of the show. And Stacey, we really want to keep up with all the things that you're doing, especially given today's climate. So thank you both. Thank to all our listeners, our viewers, and our readers. And we will talk to you in July again on Tim's Travails. We'll talk to y'all soon. Stay well.